At first, it didn't look like a breaking point. When Meghan Markle entered the royal family, the headlines were optimistic. A modern addition, a fresh perspective, someone who could help reshape an institution that had, for decades, struggled to keep up with a rapidly changing world. But behind the scenes, something shifted. And years later, the royal family still hasn't fully recovered. Because what changed wasn't just public perception, it was the balance inside the system itself. To understand why, you have to look at what the royal family was before Meghan arrived. For generations, the monarchy operated on a very specific formula: stability, hierarchy, and above all, control. Every role was clearly defined, every appearance carefully managed, every message aligned with the long-standing tradition of restraint. It wasn't just about image, it was about survival. The royal family doesn't function like a typical public institution. It relies on consistency, predictability, a quiet understanding that no single individual becomes bigger than the system itself. And for a long time, that system held. Even during moments of crisis, the structure remained intact. The public might question decisions, but the institution itself rarely appeared fractured. Then came Meghan Markle. From the very beginning, her presence introduced something the monarchy wasn't fully prepared for: unpredictability. She wasn't shaped by the system, she came from outside it. An American actress, independent, media-aware, comfortable speaking directly and openly in ways that contrasted sharply with the royal family's more reserved approach. At first, that difference was seen as an advantage. There was excitement, curiosity, even hope that this new dynamic could modernize the monarchy and make it more relatable to a global audience. But that same difference quickly became a point of tension, because the royal family doesn't adapt quickly. It wasn't built to. And when a system designed for stability meets a force of change, something has to give. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, subtle, easy to overlook at first, but internally the pressure was building. There were differences in communication style, differences in expectations, differences in how public life should be handled. And over time, those differences stopped being manageable. They became structural. One of the most significant turning points came when the line between public image and private reality started to blur. The royal family has always maintained a careful distance between the two. What happens behind palace walls stays there. But with Meghan, and by extension Prince Harry, that boundary began to weaken. Interviews, public statements, a willingness to speak openly about internal struggles. This wasn't just unusual, it was disruptive. Because once that wall is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. And that's where things began to change in a way that couldn't be reversed. The tension between Prince Harry and Prince William, for example, didn't emerge overnight, but the shift in dynamics made it more visible and more difficult to contain. Two brothers, once seen as united, now navigating fundamentally different paths, one staying within the system, the other stepping outside of it. And the more those paths diverged, the harder it became to maintain the image of unity that the royal family depends on. But this wasn't just about relationships, it was about perception. For decades, the monarchy relied on a carefully constructed narrative: continuity, duty, and quiet resilience. Now, that narrative was getting questioned in real time, not just by the media, but by the public. And once public perception starts to shift, it creates a ripple effect that's hard to control. Because the royal family doesn't just exist, it's observed, analyzed, and constantly interpreted. Every move becomes a signal, every silence becomes a statement. And in this case, the signals were becoming harder to read. Some saw Meghan as a catalyst for necessary change. Others saw her as a disruptive force that exposed weaknesses within the institution. But regardless of perspective, one thing became clear: the system was no longer operating the way it used to. And that's where the idea of recovery becomes complicated. Because what exactly would the royal family be recovering to? The version of itself that existed before Meghan Markle joined? That version depended on a level of control and consistency that may no longer be possible. Too much has changed. Too much has been said. Too much has been revealed. And once those elements enter the public space, they don't simply disappear. They reshape expectations. They redefine how the institution is viewed, not just in the moment, but moving forward. Even now, years later, you can still see the effects, subtle but persistent. Moments of distance, carefully managed appearances, a sense that something beneath the surface isn't quite as solid as it once seemed. It's not collapse, it's not chaos, but it's not the same. And maybe that's the point, because institutions like the royal family aren't designed to change quickly, but they also can't avoid change forever. What Meghan Markle's arrival did was accelerate a process that might have taken decades. She didn't create every issue, but she exposed them. And once exposed, those issues had to be dealt with, publicly or privately. Either way, the outcome was the same, a shift that couldn't be undone. So when people say the royal family hasn't fully recovered, it's not necessarily about damage in the traditional sense, it's about transformation. A system adjusting to pressures it wasn't originally built to handle, a public trying to reconcile tradition with modern expectations, and a family navigating both at the same time. The question now isn't whether things will go back to how they were, because that version may no longer exist. The real question is, what does the royal family become from here? Because whatever the answer is, it will be shaped in part by the moment everything started to change. So what do you think? Would the royal family look the same today if Meghan Markle had never joined? Or was this shift always going to happen eventually?